afternoon and welcome to our British Water Thought Leadership Series Talking on Water. My name is Mark Fletcher and I'm the current chair of British Water. I have with me today Mark Lloyd, the Chief Executive of the Rivers Trust, who's kindly agreed to an interview which we're recording to share across the water sector. Good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon, Mark.
Thanks very much. So in terms of the outline for the interview, I'm going to ask a few questions and Mark can then share his thoughts, and we might have a few follow-ups for clarification. So I hope you're all suitably relaxed so we can make a start. So first of all, can you tell us something about the Rivers Trust for anybody who maybe isn't so familiar with the organisation, Mark?
Sure. Well, the Rivers Trust started almost exactly 30 years ago, actually, with the sort of parallel formation of various independent charities at a catchment scale working to improve their rivers. It was really local people got together and said, you know, something's wrong with our river. We need to try and fix it. Let's form a charity. And then they kind of all met each other and realized that they were all doing similar things. So they formed the Association of Rivers Trusts, as it was then 20 years ago. And that's now become the Rivers Trust, as distinct from the Canal and Rivers Trust, which used to be British Waterways. So we often get confused. And really, those charities have now sprung up all over the British Isles. So throughout the whole of England, Wales and Scotland, quite a bit of Northern Ireland, and an increasing proportion of Ireland. There's a really kind of burgeoning movement in Ireland now. So we've got 67 trusts in membership. So Fantastic. All the Rivers Trusts that exist are members of ours. And really our job at the Rivers Trust is to coordinate their work nationally, to raise money, to support them, to advocate on their behalf, to kind of lead the agenda around rivers, which has gone right up the political agenda recently, and to help them do more. So they're really a sort of doing group of organizations. They get on and do things. So they re-wiggle rivers, they plant trees, they make wetlands, they plant hedges, they work with farmers to restore soils. They take out barriers to fish migration, all the kind of practical projects on the ground. And, you know, I think until recently they were doing quite local scale work, but increasingly they're becoming more strategic and delivering at a scale which can really move the needle on the dial. And it's growing really, really fast. So we've doubled our turnover in the last 2 years in the movement. So we now deliver, somewhere between 50 and 60 million pounds worth of work across the country.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that's really good. And I think people have been really pleased to understand not just the extent and that increase in interest that we see in the press anyway. So I think that's really positive. What are the current priorities for the Rivers Trust, Mark?
Well, water is such a complex subject, so trying to fix it, you could kind of look everywhere, right? So, in terms of the issues affecting rivers, I think land management is top of our list. So what happens when water hits the land? And from then on, but really the best point to intervene is when the drop of rain hits the soil, and from then on everything becomes sort of patching up after the event. So land management and sort of really restoring nature and natural functioning ecosystems to our catchments is top of mind. We are obviously, we're aware of the kind of lack of funding that is available. So we're very much focused on trying to make money work much more effectively by having it spent in much more intelligent ways, much more collaboratively, and not, getting out of silos so that we're not spending money on water resources in one place and flood relief in another and nature recovery in another. We're taking actions which address all of those agendas, but with a single action. And that for us means nature-based solutions. So nature-based solutions are a huge issue for us, and that's something we could probably talk about more. The other is data. We are an evidence-based organisation. We're very solutions-focused. And we believe that data is absolutely fundamental to success. We have poor data at the moment. We're making multi-billion-pound decisions based on poor and inadequate data. And we really believe in putting data into the hands of citizens in a way that they can understand, so that a local resident can understand more about their river than the government does. And that's done in a nice format with a nice map and a story map, so that it's digestible and it's not buried in spreadsheets. And we think data's so fundamental to success because it guides our decisions more intelligently. It generates consensus about the source of the problems, and it also allows us to monitor our interventions a lot more effectively.
Right. So you're a big champion for citizen science.
Yeah, very much so. And there's a lot more than just data that comes out of citizen science. There's an engagement that you get from local communities in their river.
It's local people passionate about their local river and catchment, so I think that's really good. So along that vein, you recently issued a State of Our Rivers report. What were the key findings, and how are you planning to address those?
Well, it followed on from one that we did 2 or 3 years ago, and actually the shocking thing was that it wasn't very different, really. Everything was about the same. The overall condition of rivers hadn't improved much, and the sources were all the same. It's agriculture and land management, it's sewage effluent and combined sewer overflows, and it's urban and highway runoff are the principal causes. But as you know, water, as I said earlier, it's a wicked problem, and there are a whole range of factors why rivers are failing to achieve good ecological status, and a lot of those are around the modification of rivers, so they're less resilient to pollutants and high and low flows. So we really need to restore those naturally functioning ecosystems, and we need better data and we need more regulation.
So do you get a sense we're starting to get under the hood and see all the elements? We may not be solving all the problems, but we're starting to see what all the contributing elements and factors are, and
I think so. I mean, I think there's a growing realization that this isn't a simple problem to fix, and that people are starting to look at. I think there's a lot of the public debate has been about sewage, and the focus is on that. So I think if you stop someone in the street, they'd probably say that the problem with our rivers is sewage, and it's all a fault of the water companies, and it's obviously a much more complicated picture than that. And I think we haven't conveyed that yet in the political discourse, and we haven't conveyed the fact that integrated solutions are required, and that's going to require everyone to come around the table and work collaboratively. So we've made a start. People care a lot more than they did about the health of our rivers, and that's fantastic. But we need to convert that into an intelligent discourse.
I agree, and sort of just picking up, and I think everything you say, in some ways, whatever direction we'd come into this, whether it was via sewage or whether it was via highways or whether, it doesn't really matter. We've still got our rivers and our catchments, and we want to do something about it. And as a system, there's dependencies and interdependencies. So there's no silver bullet to this. I think the important thing is how we come together. Are there any specific challenges that addressed in the water sector? You've just touched, you just said sewage has sort of led us in there, but any specific factors that you think in the water sector that, from that lens, over and above the CSOs, anything else that you think where you've got concerns?
Well, I have got a concern about one of the sort of consequences or corollaries of this, highlighting this issue of sewage so publicly is that many people have got a very negative view of the water sector, and I think that's bad for public trust, and public trust is vital if we're going to work in partnership and trust water companies to deliver. They're one of the principal delivery bodies really for fixing our environment. And I think it's also bad for recruitment into the sector. So I think that a lot of people would say, "Oh, I don't want to go and work for a water company, because they've got such a bad reputation. They don't want to talk about it when they're down the pub." So, I think we've got to address that, and we have to restore trust to the sector, and that's a big problem, and it's a sort of unwelcome corollary of people taking a greater attention into what's been going on. That said, I think there are some fantastic people, and nearly everyone I meet in the water sector is just as passionate about rivers as my colleagues in the Rivers Trust, who are obviously obsessed with them. And they all want to do the right thing, and people are getting creative and they're getting innovative. And so, I'm actually quite optimistic that we can get there. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy road, but I think that there is within the sector a growing clamour of consensus, really, for the way forward. We all know that what we're doing at the moment is not working, and that we need a radically different approach. So it's just getting from where we are now to that brighter future.
So I mean, it's a sort of segue. If I was to think about how, what the things we could do to create more common purpose. It's ironic because I can't think of any of the agencies or organisations or bodies. Nobody's setting out to make the situation worse. But as a consequence of where we are, there's an awful lot more we've got to do to right some of the wrongs, to take away some of the industrial legacies or some of the legacies around how we've treated rivers in the past. So there's a lot more healthy respect, and we're encouraging and nurturing biodiversity, if you like. But that's you just mentioned. Are you seeing it less combative, where we each plant our flags and defend them, and more we're coming together around a bit more of a common purpose, common agenda, whatever you like to call it, where we're seeing more how we can help each other or get these systems working better than they have done, if you like?
Yes. I mean, I think in the absence of there being an effective water governance system, which I think is a big absence at the moment.
Yes.
No one is in charge of the system at the moment, and we need someone to be in charge, in the broadest sense, really. And we need to merge together water management with environmental management, not regard nature and water as being separate things, because they're intrinsically linked. And so in the absence of that, lots of attempts have been made to get people together and to work round the table. So the formation of catchment partnerships 10 years ago was a great step forward. They've been woefully underfunded from the start, and have been progressively underfunded because haven't had any increase, and inflation has marched on. So, we do need to see them better funded. But then at that kind of regional scale, because there's 105 catchment partnerships, but at a regional scale, there have been a lot of attempts to get people around the table. They're missing money and a mandate at the moment, but things like Natural Course, which was funded by the EU, was a great example of a coming together of regulators, water companies, NGOs, businesses, to collectively gang up on the problem rather than on each other. And I think we really need to encourage more of that kind of collaborative thinking. And we're talking to the government at the moment about filling that missing middle, as we call it, at the regional scale, and creating a formal structure through which large amounts of money can be channeled, and that's the way of breaking it out of the silos, is to channel in funding for multiple purposes and then deliver actions which deliver multiple outcomes for society.
So that's really encouraging. Now, British Water represents quite the supply chain, and we're bringing a lot of organisations together. Sort of, what's your view in terms of what we can do to help solve future challenges, contribute to more collective action, if you like? Do we need to upskill, reskill? Are there services that we need to do different to the ones we've historically done? How do you see it through your lens, if you like?
Well, the water companies' plans are really ambitious for the next 5 years. So they're talking about 96 billion of expenditure over 5 years. Who knows where that will end up after going through the Ofwat machine? But that's a very, very significant investment program in anyone's book. But we would really like to see a much larger proportion of that investment program going into nature-based solutions, and also sorry, put my phone on silent. But also a much more collaborative approach to delivery of that program, with other organisations making contributions from the private sector. And certainly, if you look at the advanced WINEP, there is quite a significant match funding complement to that. So I think, in answer to your question, I think the supply chain needs to learn how to work in partnership, particularly with organisations like Rivers Trust, but others as well, Wildlife Trust, National Trust, Woodland Trust, to develop more collaborative delivery models, which can make use of that our ability to secure co-funding. And I think also skill up in areas of nature-based solution delivery to reduce the level of uncertainty around nature-based solutions, and to give people confidence to make what is apparently quite a radical leap from engineered solutions, which we've been delivering for decades and we kind of understand to within quite a small margin of error, to have the confidence to build integrated constructed wetlands and everything else. And I think the regulators have a key role to play here in changing their regulatory systems and frameworks to enable that kind of innovative, creative thinking.
I think there's something in that, and that's where maybe we'd have to see some of that innovation around the governance, around the way in which the regulation can become a bit less siloed and a bit more collective. So you're preaching it, it's music to my ears, if you like. I'll be impartially supportive of what you're talking about. So where do you see the opportunities to collaborate to safeguard our environment? Sort of think about delivering a social contract for communities where we're all part of this. How can we do it where people who volunteer and people who are passionate and have local knowledge and it's valued, how can we bring that together so that the sum of the parts is greater than the, do you know what I mean? It feels to me like so much energy is wasted not focusing at the solution, but on us all almost arguing who's got the best argument rather than collectively committing to what a better solution could be.
Yeah, and I think we've suffered from kind of initiative-itis and a kind of pilot purgatory. Who was it? I heard someone saying the other day that we've got more pilots than Heathrow, and we need to kind of make our minds up and be bold and make some big, bold decisions, which I think we can stand up with evidence. So, and I think, you're right, we do need to tap into that local knowledge. So it feels to me that the catchment partnerships, need to be greatly empowered to produce really good local plans, which can identify the specific opportunities. Farmer up the road, we know that he wants to build a lake. We know we've got a problem with flooding and pollution in this river. Let's put a wetland in there, which is going to store the water and hold it back and reduce the pollution coming from that boggy bit of ground where he's got his cattle. So those little opportunities can only be known to that local community, but they need to be delivered in a strategic context. And that's where that kind of missing middle comes in. If you can fill that at a regional scale and get sufficient amounts of money and a clear mandate to bring all those local plans together and then say, okay, what are the priority pressures that we want to address? What funds have we got for what outcomes? And now let's organise that in a sensible way. It's it's easy to say, harder to do, but I think the benefit of it would be spectacular in terms of the cost benefit and the cost effectiveness of the interventions that we're making. We're spending billions of pounds at the moment in ways which are often ineffective, and as I said earlier, kind of based on dodgy data. So that. Those simple fixes, I think, could improve things enormously without actually costing the exchequer any more money.
I agree, and lots of wise words there. And there's an element coming through of what you're saying. It's there's systems thinking, there's pragmatism, there's the scale at which we operate as at a catchment, and it's really important that we get the governance right. And increasing role of catchment science, which itself will give us much better local data, which itself will give us a better understanding of it's a sort of cause and effect. When we're making interventions, what are the benefits of those interventions or the disbenefits, and being able to assess that in a much more comprehensive way. That's been really helpful. Just as a sort of final, is there anything else? We've covered an awful lot there, but is there anything else you'd like to share with our members? It's an opportunity. If there's anything, a plea out there that we are all on the same side, if you like.
Well, exactly. I think we're pulling in the same direction, and I think we just need to coordinate our pulling, as it were.
Yes.
And so it feels like there are quite a lot of partnerships that we form between Rivers Trust and the supply chain. We would really like to do more of those. I think we can bring something unique. There's something that charities can bring, which is a connection to those local communities. It is keeping it real. It is kind of bringing in co-financing. It is the ability to do things in a really positive way, so that they're seen as a community-led operation. I mean, when we built a wetland at Ingoldsthorpe with Anglian Water got its most positive Twitter response ever, because lots of local school children came and planted the reeds, and then they all went back to school and told their parents, and the parents all tweeted about what a fantastic thing that they'd all done. And but that's what you get from working with charities. And I think we've professionalized a lot, so that we need to do more of that, so that we're in a position where we can kind of join with contractors on framework contracts and things.
Yes.
But there is I think a great partnership to be had out there between the supply chain and organizations like ourselves and the Wildlife Trust and lots of other environmental NGOs out there. There's far more work to do than we could possibly ever, even in my most ambitious wild dreams, could deliver ourselves. So I think there's a lot for us all to do together. But I think let's make use of our various different skills and bring those together into something greater than the sum of the parts, as you said earlier.
So I think that's a really encouraging place for us to come to, having experienced early AMP interventions where it's almost something we're going to do to the community rather than with or for the community. And I think the companies and the regulators and all the organisations involved know there's a better way, and I think we're moving in that direction. And I'm really encouraged that if we've got leadership like yours advocating these sorts of messages, then we are moving in the right direction. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I also appreciate your willingness to engage, share your thoughts, your ideas and your concerns. But I'm feeling more positive, but recognising that we've all had a tough few years, but maybe we can use that really to stimulate really positive collective action. I want to wish you every success in your role in the Rivers Trust as they continue to grow, and anything that British Water can do to help to either carry a message or take an issue and discuss it, we'd be more than happy through our forums. Thank you very much. That concludes our session, and effectively it's a wrap. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark. That was great fun.